So just taking a look at ground, and this is one of my dailies. When you are doing your dailies and you notice something is off, feel free, check it. That you don't. These are just for you, really. I'm only looking at them to help you along, but the fact that you do notice that something is off says that you are understanding enough that you know something is off. Explore, check it. This one, the cylinder, something was wrong. So I plotted in the actual space in 3D that everything was taking up, and I saw that the cylinder did not exist in the same space that they did. So I fixed it. Just to see that I could and I understood what was going on. This isn't exactly something that I would, put up on my DeviantArt or anything like that. That's not what dailies are about. And then I just wanted to talk about planes. The planes and the slopes. Here we have the top, and then for a sphere, I would actually draw the ellipse. An ellipse is a circle in perspective, which we're gonna deal with the actual construction of other shapes. Not this time. This stuff is complicated enough. So, but I consider that a top. So this is a top. This is a top, but it's if it was sitting on top, long ways, it would be a top, but it's sloping, which is, I didn't mention what a slope was before, I don't think. So there we have the slope, and then these faces match, and this is also the ellipse going to the side, so all of these, are pointing out. And then I had to find the one that also matched that and pointed out, and that's how I was able to fix it. So you definitely want to use ground to consider how to fix things. This one, which is one of the dailies somebody did. This one had an issue with intersecting. As you can see, these two actually, and I cut it out in red, where the cylinder actually cuts into the box. If you don't consider that space on the ground, things like that are going to happen. And then, what you can do is, when you're considering the space, just make sure they can't cross that line. Even if they're flush up against each other, they can't cross over the line, and then they won't intersect. So, oh, that didn't even get on there. So, for the person who did this, keep that in mind going forward. And this one is another one of my dailies, because I wanted to show one of the pitfalls that I fell into. Now, these guys, that face matches the top here, matches that slope. This face matches that slope, as though they were stacked on top of each other, and this one fell over. But these don't match the stuff over here. The top of it, they just, because they don't match, these guys exist in the same space, and these guys kind of, they're fitting not so much, but the bottom of this one, I actually considered it in the same space as this, but I didn't consider the top in the same space, and the sphere matched the top of the space here, so this just fell apart. But you have to construct it all at once. It's going to be difficult to start thinking of it that way, but you sketch it all and construct it all together. And then you go in and find your lines that it's going, that's going to be the lines that everybody sees. That's one of the problems that I had in my drawing of the street, was I didn't do that. I did part at a time, and so while they're constructed, the parts don't match up. Alright, this is something I pulled off of DA, just to show you stuff not to do. In this one, when you're setting up to draw, you don't want stuff like this to happen. The one interesting, unique element that's in this whole setup is completely engulfed, and that's why I put it in blue. That's the silhouette. You know, the outside is a silhouette, as though you blacked it in, but I did blue. It's completely engulfed. This doesn't exist. Because when people look, the first thing you see is that silhouette. So there's no interesting shapes. No interesting shapes in here. This one could have been interesting, but not if it doesn't balance on that side. So all the interest is really lost. And a major problem with this is it is constructed in, you know, X and Y, where Y is flat on the page instead of coming up off the page. So because of this, the whole thing ends up just being flat, where, you know, is that really going back into space? No, it's not, because there is no extra the third dimension for it to go anywhere, and that's why the whole thing ends up to be really flat. And then also we also have things that are intersecting. There is no way that this and that whole corner of this is not cutting into that other box. Just like this right here, this is cutting into the box. This globe actually looks like it's also cutting in there. This is cutting into the box. They're so close and they're flush against each other, but they're not following. They don't share. These planes that are up against each other are not the same. So these are things you really, really, really have to avoid. And that doesn't mean they all have to, you know, they have to be stacked up like exactly. Oh, wow, that's great. They don't have to be stacked up exactly, you know, all facing the same way. Not at all. You can actually, it's a little too complicated because it's part of perspective, but you can have things go pointing different ways but still sharing the same space. So yeah, this is an example of a lot of the problems that we all still gonna face, but have to really, really, really try not to. And the main reason for this, all the problems in here, is because this was drawn flat on the page in 2 dimensions with X and Y. Whereas this one, which, you know, it's a much more attractive setup because it's got interesting shapes. Every single, if you notice, every single element has parts of it. There's nothing in here that's completely engulfed in the setup. So everything is part of the silhouette. That's something you really, really need. Right here, you have a bad tangent. They should have put space in between those two, but you know, whatever. It's still, that's one small thing out of something that's really working well. And here's an example of, you know, this face is the same this face, but they're not facing in the same direction, but they feel like they're going together. You know, I color-coded it, so we've got these brown faces. They're all facing, you know, that way-ish. The red faces, the tops. And you notice these tops aren't going straight up and down. They wouldn't fit into the box straight up and down, so they're going in different directions, which is fine as long as you make sure the bottoms and the tops, they're still solid, and they still share that one relationship with this is a center line going through it, is how they have that relationship in there. So these things are all about how the different planes relate to each other. And you know, here we have a good example of things are not intersecting. Here's a great example of flat things, but giving them volume by constructing them. You know, this, all in all, is the type of thing that we're trying to do as the initial construction. And this doesn't take very long at all. This is very quick. And then once you have this, you can move on and you can decide what your details or whatever, and you start putting stuff in. And as you notice, this was not constructed in, you know, on 2D. This is constructed where the third dimension is part of the ground. and then y depends on the second and third dimension, side to side and, to the side and to the back, rather than depending only on up and down and side to side. I hope that this kind of shows what I showed happening in real life, so you can compare this happening in the drawing to happening in real life. So, then the last thing we're gonna talk, we've got examples, construction versus detail. Here is very much thinking of, Y and X, where they drew the face and then try to use contour to throw in the back. The side and the back. They just toss it in there. But that doesn't make it solid at all. As you look, this doesn't look solid. And the same thing is happening here, where it's just, at least this one, they drew the face and then they added the side. This one, they drew the whole thing and then they put the side on the inside. And then on the top, the side's on the inside, and the bottom, the side's on the outside. That's not constructing things. Here we have this where, yeah, this one considers, okay, there's a bounding box. I'm working in my bounding box. But there's no relationship between the bounding box and reality. And then also, if you notice, the details do not follow the construction. They're not lined up the same way that it is constructed. This one, obviously, this is what we're going for. Not only do we have our bounding box, but our bounding box is in relation to the ground. So now it starts to exist. And then all of the details follow the construction the way they're supposed to. So this is what you're going for. And I can almost assure you, this probably took this dude, whoever did this, 5 to 10 minutes to do. When you do your construction first, your work goes so much faster. And like I said, you work with more confidence. You get a better sense of solidity. And then putting in details is kind of carving things out. It's not so much figuring out where things go. You already know where they go because the structure is already there for you. So, and I know I said last, but one thing real quick. One last thing, which I didn't finish it actually. So I don't know if you can even see it since it's still pencil. A little difficult there. Focus. All right. So yeah, this is a mall. If you look, you can kind of see where, this was constructed as a box and then cut the slopes out. So here's a box, a slope, sloping down. Here's a box to slope to make these stairs. And then this is one box for that little block here. This one box, but then I carve into the box to make the store. So you're not always just working, you're not just working from the surface out. You could also work from the surface in. And then, working from the ground up. Down here, I'm working, that's the ground. Up here, this is ground. So that's why here I put that box in for the whole thing to make sure they relate, and then they end up actually hitting the both grounds. Stairs are not easy to do. It's going to take quite a bit of practice to make them line up and everything, but, these are the type of things you want to do. Do all your construction first. Then start going in and putting in details and stuff like that. But what I do, if I can't figure out, I guess I got kind of, I didn't want to deal with stuff over here and at top, so I just went over and I was like, you know, put in little mannequins to figure out while I was trying to think about what was going on over here. And then I, you know, detailed the stairs and did all sorts of other stuff while I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And never ended up finishing it, but that's why there are pockets of detail, whereas some stuff is just completely empty. But you can still see where I started to construct. This is a skylight, so this is getting carved up into the ceiling. So that's kind of how you want to work. Even though we're only working with very, very simple shapes, it's going to eventually get very complex. And if you start the right way, the complexity isn't going to be a hindrance, which is what I am trying to, you know, help people not be their own worst enemy and put their own foot up their ass. And, you know, a lot of the times when we're drawing, we're sitting there with our own thumb up our ass because it's stuff that we're doing and that we're neglecting that's making the drawing come out so badly, but we're just saying, oh, well, I'm not a good enough artist. It's not that you're not good enough. It's that you're not working smart, you know? So just, it's all about trying to gain confidence and working smart, not hard. We all work hard, but it only counts when you work smart too.